G'day, people. Welcome to the very special edition of the Market Watch podcast. It's proudly brought to you by TopSport.com.au. Remember, they are the home of the best multis. We might get to a multi a little bit later. Game one, State of Origin, just around the corner. We thought we'd get our usual suspects to cast their eyes over it. I'm talking about Tristan Merlehan, the number one seed up there at TopSport, and Gerard Condon from readingtheplay.com.au. How are you, boys? It's exciting time of the year. It's Origin time.
It is. It's exciting, and we're only one sleep away from the big game. And obviously Queensland winning the last match last year, so we're going in with a lot of confidence and looking forward to seeing if we can keep that run going. But no, it's going to be good. Game one at Sydney, very close betting game, nice totals, even totals. I think it's going to be a cracker, and I just can't wait for them to get out on the field. There's been so much talk, so much lead up about all the teams and the changes and the ins and outs that I just can't wait for the footy to start tomorrow night.
Yes, g'day, gentlemen. Origin, and it just looks a ripper series, doesn't it? Really close. Looks very, very much like a traditional Origin series that we were used to a few years ago, where there's been some key ins and key outs. We've got coaching changes. We've got very even lineups, very little between them in the markets. Game one in Sydney, then we go to Perth, and then game three back in Brisbane. I've got a hunch that might end up being a decider, and so it just should be some cracking Origin football on the field.
Okay, so the way it's going to run today, we'll have a look at the markets with Tristan. We're going to have a look at the teams and how they line up, in particular the spine, the replacements. We'll have a look at the edge as well. We'll talk about the coaches and how they've been in their preparation. As you mentioned, a new coach in Billy Slater. Been there, done that quite obviously as a player. And then we'll have a look at our betting plays for this upcoming game. Just to remind you, Tristan, I know you are the last start winners in the State of Origin match. However, the aggregate score in the lead up to that 2-point victory in game three was 76 points to 6 in New South Wales' favour. Just thought I'd put that out there to bring some balance to this podcast, albeit I am overwhelmed 2-1 at this point. All right, let's get into the markets, mate. There's been they've fluctuated a little bit over the course of the 10 days.
Yes, and just to your point, Jimmy, the Titans won 3 starts back if we're going to go back in time and pick arbitrary stats out. So, but anyway, the New South Wales side are favourites. So we opened this market up at the start of the year, and that was when, before we knew Latrell was out, before we knew Turbo was out, we were assuming we were going to have pretty full strength sides, and the market did open up at 8.5 lines. So New South Wales were very firm. I think they were about $1.35, $1.40 back then. Obviously, throughout the course of the season, we've had some significant injuries. Latrell going down first, then Turbo about 2 or 3 weeks ago. When the teams were announced on Monday last week, the line opened up at 3.5 and $1.65 New South Wales, $2.25 Queensland. Since we opened that market and we opened our shoulders on the betting when the teams were announced, the money has come for the Blues, and it's caused the line to go from 3.5 out to 4. It's $1.58 now, New South Wales to win the game, $2.42 Queensland, and 36.5 the total points. That's also gone up a point. So totals is a very interesting number, because we've seen throughout the course of the NRL season, numbers have been a little bit lower than what we've seen in prior years, or certainly last year, just for the subtlety of the rule changes. But also then you've got to factor in the weather that's obviously had a massive impact at various stages throughout the year. So this number is around about where it was set last year, I believe. So 35 up to 36.5. I think that's an interesting talking point as well.
Well, I think there's just a lot of value around the Queensland price and market positions, because I see the game as being very even. I do think New South Wales have a slight advantage, and history tells us that in game one in New South Wales, but I don't think that there's a lot between them. So 242 straight off the bat for Queensland, I think is a great price. My line is somewhere closer to 2 than 4. So I think if you're getting 4.5, which has been around, I think that's the value. If you're looking at a close contest, then I'd rather be with the plus than I would be trying to give up the minus. And 36.5 is very interesting. The last 9 game one of Origin, excluding last year, where we've had a traditional home ground of either Sydney or Brisbane, those last 9 have all been well under 36. So I think the unders clearly is the favourite, 36.5. In some of the rule changes, and I think the selections here, I think we're probably close to that mark. I just lean slightly to the under.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We'll get to those markets at the end in closer detail. But overall, we've got a bit of detail now coming out from these camps about where players are going to play, and it was really interesting. So New South Wales had 2 players on the wings who traditionally played on the left-hand side. Queensland had 2 players on the wing that were playing on the right-hand side. We've had confirmation today that Selwyn Cobbo will stay on the right, the first gamer, which makes a fair bit of sense. Xavier Coates over to the left-hand side. So he'll partner with Valentine Holmes. For New South Wales, we're still getting waiting for clarification, but we would presume that Daniel Tupou plays on the left-hand side, having done it almost exclusively, certainly at State of Origin level as well. And Brian To'o, who has the capacity to play on the right-hand side, will be on that side as well. Does that give you anything at all when you start thinking about that and the way that these teams are going to line up? Can I also make another point before you get to that, Gerard? And that is, and Tristan, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this. We are now speculating a bit over 24 hours out from the game about whether Jack Whiten starts at left centre or it's Stephen Crichton. Now, State of Origin is one of the showpiece events of the rugby league calendar. I would suggest that it's implemented when you name your side on that Monday. That side cannot change for all sorts of reasons. But let's talk specifically about from a betting point of view, unless there is an injury and a player is then unable to take his position. I think that's just being fair to your customers, for want of a better term, but I'd be interested to get your take on it, Tristan.
Yeah, well, to be brutally honest and upfront, we have to then build, like, by the fact that we can't be certain and there's all these ducks and drakes going on, we have to build into our model that any bench player that's a back is effectively starting. So we have Stephen Crichton priced as if he's starting because there is that uncertainty there. So there's no way to get around that. That's just the reality of the situation when you've got uncertainty, because you're only ever going to lay him from our perspective if he starts, and you're not if he sits on the bench. So that is a true indication of where the punters are being adversely affected, and everyone does the same thing. Like, we had an example there in the NRL a fortnight ago where we made certain assumptions that players were going to play because guys dropped off the extended bench. And then all of a sudden, when in the Brisbane-Newcastle game, for example, when Ezra Mann dropped off the extended bench, so you make that assumption then that Adam Reynolds is playing. And then all of a sudden he drops out and they make up this fictitious rule where he's able to come back into the squad again, where he was under a cloud the whole time. So I think there needs to be much stronger and more structured rules. And yeah, what's the point of naming a team list if you're not going to adhere to it? I know coaches like to try to keep the other side guessing, but it hurts the fans, it hurts the fantasy players. Yep. There's all these myriad, and it's not just the NRL. We had an instance in the AFL 2 weeks ago where a bloke was named at fullback and he was never ever once going to line up there, and that's another scenario. So I just think now that we're getting that there's product fees getting taken from the NRL, the punt, that's such a heavily invested punting sport as well as fantasy, that these sort of things, yeah, if you name your side on Monday, that's how it's got to line up, and then that way we can make our assumptions. Punters can bet with confidence, and you can pick your fantasy sides with a lot of confidence too.
Well, and at the start of this season, they weakened and loosened some of those rules supposedly to allow for COVID, which can be fair. But the examples that you give, Tristan, are just farcical. They have man drop off the complete list and then all of a sudden being reinstated and a starting player and a key out in Reynolds is just farcical. And that's not how your customers of the game should be treated. But Jimmy, getting back to your points around some of those selections, I think you're right. I think Tupou is traditionally a left edge player and he'll play left for New South Wales. And when he's played Origin under Fittler going back 2 seasons ago, he did play that left edge. To'o is, I think, better known as a left edge player, but I think he has also played right. So he'll go to that right edge. He'll pair up with Staggs on the other. We then have this question mark about whether Whiten starts or Crichton starts. I actually think that he'll probably go with Whiten as he's now selected, because over the last 3 or 4 days, he has talked up about how he expects to play Crichton as a utility and the different roles that he can cover, be that fullback, be that centre. At a push, he could play centre and move Whiten to 5'8" if need be. So I think that Whiten starts. That means that we've got Whiten and Staggs on either edge. I think you need a police warrant to get the ball off either of those. So I don't know that the wingers are really, unless in open space, going to see a lot of ball off either Whiten or Staggs. I think that narrows down slightly what New South Wales do with that attack. I think their left edge for New South Wales is probably the weakest of the four edges. You've got Tupou Whiten, you've got Lilulai, and you've got Sims. I mean, I think everybody is somewhat surprised that Sims was picked again. I don't know that his club form of recent times has possibly warranted that. You've got Sims and Whiten side by side. Neither of them like to pass the football. If I was Queensland, I'd be loved to see a lot of their attack down that edge, because I think it's going to be a lot easier to diffuse and defend. I also think on that edge, Kafusi and Gagai are two very good defenders, and I think that gives them some strength. Depending on where they place and if they can isolate DCE, there may be an option there. On the other edge, though, I think this is where the game change of might unfold for me. I think Queensland have an advantage on their left because we've got Capewell, Munster, Holmes, Coates up against Murray, Cleary, Staggs and Toto. Now, if we go back to that Cronulla Brisbane game, Holmes gave Staggs a bit of a bath, and I've been saying for most of this season that for mine, I've seen different occasions over the last 2 years where Staggs does have some issues in defence, both lining up and then technically hitting with his shoulder. I think they're going to play a lot of football at him. I think Munster, if Queensland are going to be in this game, is going to need to have one of his best games at this level. And so I think that Munster-Holmes combination is going to be very, very strong. See a lot of football. Coates is on the outside of that edge. I think he's an absolute moral as an anytime try scorer if the game unfolds the way that I expect it might be. I think the middle probably balances itself out, although the key question mark has to be how much of an influence Ruben Cotter has with the football. We know how much work rate he's got, but does he offload? Does he create any real yardage advantage? But then the key factor, Jimmy, has to be coming off the bench. If you've got Harry Grant and you've got Carrigan, there's some X factor, especially around Harry Grant.
I think it's a real reflection about how these sides intend to play the game. And so if we go to New South Wales, and you don't remember Tarek Sims's try assist for Brian Toto in game one last year? Oh, that's right. Everyone got a try assist in that game. So it's hard.
They did.
Yeah, that's right. But no, in fairness, I think it's a to 'em and through 'em style game that New South Wales want to play. So think about the factors that are doing that. It's game one, traditionally more tight than other games. Statistics bear that out. It's Accor Stadium. So that's another reason that an expansive game is probably not going to be played by New South Wales. I think New South Wales just try to blow the doors off the Queensland team. And you know what? You've got to do that for 80 minutes. Right? This is Origin, as they say. There's no settling period. They will not finesse their way past Queensland. Not with Whiten, not with Staggs, not with Sims. Murray is a great player, but unless he's playing that ball-playing role at 13, then he's not really a passer. So Isaiah Yeo there with his hands on his footy and bringing his forwards over the line, I think, and even looking at the bench that New South Wales have picked, I think that it really does say, well, this is how we think we're going to play them. So you've got Martin, Campbell-Gillard and Madison. They've got a bit of flexibility there, but there's a real feel about how they want to play the game, and that is that to 'em and through 'em style. Conversely, you look at Billy Slater and you're thinking what he's going to do, and that is a bit more expansive. So, but that can get you into trouble, right? Unless you establish that dominance through the middle, unless you have unbelievable individual performances like a Munster, like a Ponga, who does like that left-hand side as well too. So not only do we have the two sides going head-to-head, but we've almost got the contrasting styles going head-to-head as well, Tristan, which is a really interesting setup. And that game score, 36.5, so low. I think you were saying there has been lower this year in the National Rugby League, but the circumstances were playing their part in that.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously when Magic Round was scheduled a few weeks ago, there was very significant weather forecasts all on the same ground. I think we might have got some games down to 34.5 or something in that sort of vicinity. So there were some some games that have been lower, but it's still a very low number compared to it. But comparatively, Origin is always a very low number. It's always a very tight, expected to be low-scoring game. And as Gerard said, the numbers in recent years have backed that up. So, and particularly now when we have got a game where the head-to-head on the line is so close, I think it does naturally keep those teams together a little bit more, where you don't get the blowouts like we might have seen in game one that I might have forgotten about. But the looking at the to score a try market, which Gerard touched on, where we have got the two New South Welshmen as favourites to score tries, which is To'o and Tupu at $2.08 and $2.13, where Gerard was mentioning that it might be difficult for them to see the ball, so they might present some value in other areas of it. And Xavier Coates at $2.50 and Selwyn Cobbo there at $2.46 are the two shortest Queenslanders. So just my take on the team list, because I think the one area that Queensland's got that big X factor is particularly with Harry Grant coming off the bench and also Carrigan. There was quite a substantial push. We've launched our player performance markets, and we've got 101 individual player performance markets up for this game. So we've got a lot of action on it. And some of our professional punters have really taken a stance against Ruben Cotter. So they've backed the unders quite significantly. It's 44.5, I believe. So whether that gives us some guidance on potentially maybe there's going to, the assumption is that maybe he might come out and really try to have a fiery 20, 30 minutes, but maybe he doesn't play the normal minutes that you'd expect in an NRL game. So there's a few different theories and a few different ways to look at it. But those player performance markets can sort of tend, because it's difficult for us to price them up because you're looking at data throughout the course of the NRL season. And of course, we know Origin is a completely different beast.
I think the other interesting point here too is what happens at number 9. I think Slater's gone with a bit of a masterstroke in having two strike players playing at number 9, so that you've got obviously Hunt starting, and let's remember that Hunt's picked up the Meninga medal 2 of the last 3 years for being Queensland's best player. And he can really roll his sleeves up early and start the game, but he also has got high work rate, but some variation out of dummy half. And then you've got Harry Grant coming off the bench, clearly speaks for itself. For New South Wales, it's all about Cook playing 80 minutes. If Cook doesn't play 80 minutes, they're in trouble, because it'll mean Lualai goes to number 9 and dummy half. And I'm not sure that works for them. I certainly think that brings them back a level. So if they pick up an injury or he runs out of fatigue, that key change of mine. I think Queensland again have a little bit more strike there. And Jimmy, to your point about New South Wales wanting to go through the front door and really go to them and through them and just work really hard through the middle of the game, that opens up some opportunity, I think, for Queensland into the second half, where if there's some fatigue back through the middle, a guy like Harry Grant has got a lot of opportunity to just create something. And if Hunt then comes back on, I would expect for probably a 10 or 15-minute stint into that second half, off a refresh break. Again, I think that gives them some punch. So very intriguing how the attacking options start to play out.
There's two key questions, isn't there, around that? Knowing that Tino can easily slip back to lock forward, you go, okay, at what minute does Harry Grant come on? Like, how many does he play? Is it 55? Is it 60? When does that happen? And how many minutes is it with Queensland with Hunt and Harry Grant on the field at the same time? And see what that does. And that goes to that Ruben Cotter market, like how long is he on the field? And that's the really interesting one about that.
Just on that, Jimmy, I think we'll see Hunt play the last 15 of the second half, and that's when they'll have the dual options. And Hunt's done that for Queensland in the past, where he's come on and played 13 for the last 20 or 15 minutes, and it's been very positive.
Just having a look quickly at the spines. Of all the spine players, I would suggest that Kalen Ponga is under the most pressure. Tedesco, proven performer. Munster, we know as well. Luai showed last year that he is outstanding. No problems with Cleary and Cherry Evans. Hunt and Cook, question marks over their credentials. There are no question marks over their credentials. We're waiting for that performance from, and maybe even a series from Kalen Ponga that confirms to everyone what we think is the case. Fair comment?
Well, I think to your point there, Jimmy, it's not just necessarily the question marks, it's who's waiting in the wings behind them. And yeah, I feel obviously there is that X factor of Reece Walsh. She probably isn't banging down the door yet either, but there probably isn't as big a gap between Ponga and Walsh as what there might be between some of the other players. There was a little bit of chirp about Tedesco and maybe Pappenhausen if he was fully fit, but obviously that's that question's null and void, and we know how instrumental Teddy is to that side and the captaincy, that I don't think it was ever a realistic consideration. But yeah, I agree with you, and the fact that you can still bring Jack Wyden into that side and retain Jerome Luai, I think takes the pressure off in that sense as well. So yeah, I think most of the halves and the spine are in pretty safe spaces. But yeah, Kalen Ponga really needs to step up. He needs to make sure that he produces and puts himself into the spot that he's been paid now in that sort of regard. So these are the sort of environments he needs to step up and show his worth.
I think the key thing with Ponga is that these very talented players that we know have the ability and the talent, when they get to representative level and they're playing in and around the best of the best, there's the opportunity to shine. And I think that's where Ponga gets the opportunity to stand up in this series. And I expect that he does. He's been playing in a poor team, and at times he's also played poorly. But this is fresh. This is an opportunity. Dry tracks will suit him, and I think playing around some of the options that they're going to want to do here in attack, especially on his favoured left edge, will also suit him.
Yeah, good point. What about from a coaching perspective? We've got a guy that's been there and done it and had a lot of success in Brad Fittler, and now we've got a bloke who's been there as a player, doesn't coach a club side, first go at coaching, just happens to waltz into the Queensland State of Origin team. What's been your assessment on the performances of Brad Fittler and Billy Slater, obviously standing from the outside?
Well, I think the key thing about Fittler is I've seen some holes in some of the things that he's done as a rep coach, and that's only being human as a coach. But, I think Wayne Bennett exposed a few issues going back 2 seasons ago. And I think by game 3, I thought that, Bennett may well have been renting some space in Freddie's head, the way that he was tactically playing the media and tactically playing the game. And, the fact that Queensland came back from getting thumped in game 2 to then win the decider at home in game 3 with what was a very mediocre team just said so much about Bennett as a coach and at this level. Fittler's going to be without Latrell. He's going to be without Turbo. This is going to be very much about him actually coaching to get the result here. For Queensland, we're making some assumptions about Billy Slater. And the one thing that we do know is the guy's an absolute winner. He just completely excelled at Origin, and Origin is something that means a hell of a lot to him. And I think that that's come through in some of the things that he said and talked and done as a coach over the last 4 or 5 days. As a guy that's a winner, he's also appeared to always be very meticulous in his preparation. And, I've heard a few things from a few people who have been close to the Queensland coach and the camp over the last week, that his planning has been to the minute with what they've done with training sessions and some of the tactics. So it's still an assumption, but I actually think he's really going to aim up and prove to be a winner and a real advantage for Queensland.
The thing I really like as well is, and it was a little bit like in Freddie's first year, where the thing that always struck you about Billy when he played football was the confidence and the confidence he exuded and the way he backed his own ability. And I think it was summed up in that chip and chase all those years ago in Origin, which has become folklore. And I think the first opportunity he's had to set a line in the sand when he selected his side, he's gone with the informed players. He's going to give them that confidence that he has himself. He could have potentially gone for some more conservative Corey Oates type selections. He's gone Selwyn Cobbo. He's given the kid a shot. And I think when you've got someone of that ilk doing that and exuding that, it just brings the players forward. I'm excited to see how it goes. And then he's also done brought Ben Hunt in to start, and he's got Harry Grant. So just a few unconventional things that he's obviously backing his ability. Tom will tell if they're the right moves, but certainly from my end, I think he's started his career really, really well.
Righto, lads. Let's get into some betting options for the listeners here. What are you seeing, Gerard?
Well, Jimmy, as I said at the outset, I just think if we're looking at a very close game, that I want to be with the plus. I like the Queensland team. I think they've got some workers through the middle. I like the two centres. I think there's some attack advantage, but also they're both very strong defenders. I think all of that's a plus for Queensland. It's a very even matchup, but I want to be with the plus. I like Queensland to win game one, but my main bet would be with the plus start of 4. I think that's a key advantage. In the series, I think we'll end up with a decider. So I want to be with Queensland to win the series. Any score, somewhere around $2.30 was my longer term play. And options into this game, well, I do think that the points is probably somewhere around where I think it's going to end. I'm happy to stay out of that, but I do think Coates as an anytime try scorer is almost immoral. And I think the value on that edge is Holmes at $4.10. I thought that's also a great bet.
Yeah, I like the. I was thinking low scoring game, tight contest. I think 8 of the last 9 at Accor Stadium have been won by 6 points or less. I'm predicting a New South Wales victory, so I like the 1 to 12, $2.94, New South Wales. And I just get the sense that Tedesco is going to play one of those captain's knocks that we've seen from him at this level so many times. He's an anytime try scorer for me, and it's not sweeping down a left-hand edge or a right-hand edge. It's just where you just put your hand up and you follow the ball, you follow the ball, you follow the ball, and he's there to collect the pass to score the try. So I'm going to go with Tedesco as my anytime try scorer at $2.50. Tristan?
Yeah, I'm the same. I feel, well, not the same as you, Jim. I'm the same as Gerard, where I think the plus brings you along a long way into this match. But I really like the unders. I just think it's a game where we're going to see a really tight affair. So one of the options that I like is looking at that line totals double. I just think if Queensland stay in the game, I think there is a chance that New South Wales could potentially get out there and get some confidence up. But I think if Queensland win this game or stay within that 4.5, it really plays into that under's favour. So I'm looking at the Queensland plus 4.5 into the under 36.5 full-time line totals double. So that's my play. And then from the to score a try option, I'm just looking at someone that just seems to always be there in that Origin environment. Dane Gagai at $3.15. I just think he's a massive chance of scoring another try at Origin level. So I'm going to take him as my anytime try scorer.
It's amazing that over the course of the last 10 days and beforehand that we've all been presented with exactly the same level of information, and yet somehow we always look at it in a different way in Queensland and New South Wales. What you see and what I see, somehow it's different. But anyway.
Well, and the really good thing about that, Jimmy, it just tells us what a cracking series we should have. We're not looking at a lopsided series here. We're not going into game one like we were last year, expecting New South Wales to win by 20 or 30. Well, they won by 50. So that's great for the game as well. And it's just great for Origin. And that's what makes Origin so good, isn't it? The quality of this contest.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And that is the thing. No Turbo, no Latrell. Okay, and this one's being played in Sydney. You'd love to know well, I'll throw it at you, Tristan. What would the price of this match be if it was being played at Suncorp Stadium? Head-to-head.
Yeah, well, I think this is almost, we've got the NBA basketball series going at the moment, and the line in that game was 3.5 at Golden State. So you'd almost feel that if game one was being played in Queensland, I suggest it would be almost flipped. I think it'd be $1.60 Queensland, $2.35 New South Wales, something like that. Obviously, by the time we get to Queensland's going to be a bit of water under the bridge, so it might be different by the time we actually get there in game three. But if game one was being priced there right now, I would just flip the market completely, and I think that's about as realistic as what we need to be.
And I think that point tells you how close the series is, because if historically history tells us that game one in Sydney, New South Wales have an advantage, yet we're only at -4, well, I would suggest that New South Wales at home and Homebush are probably 4 points home ground advantage. So we're back to even teams and then -4 because of the home ground advantage. That's how close this game and series looks.
Where are we watching it, lad? I'm calling the game, so can't wait for that. What about you guys? Where will you be watching?
Home in the lounge room for me, Jimmy, soaking it all in, and a couple of quiet drinks and enjoying it all.
Yeah, I'll be likely in the trading room with the boys, and yeah, we normally get a bit of pizza on Origin night in the office, and might have a couple of beers once the game kicks off. So I'll be doing my best. I've got a Bucks party on the weekend, so I'll be doing my best to keep it a little bit low key in the lead up to it. But I can't wait. And the good part is in the trading room, we've got plenty of New South Welshmen and Queenslanders, so there's always a lot of banter in the lead into the big game.
Gentlemen, may the best team win, and may they be wearing blue.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, guys.